Good afternoon, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you and call to order our Middlesex County Council meeting for Tuesday, October 26th. It's been a while since we've shared good news stories from across the county, and today seems like a good day to do just that. And what a better way to start. But with baby news, we all want to congratulate Councillor Vanderhayden on the birth of her great-granddaughter, Sophia Adriana. It was a stressful week for the family as Sophia's big sister ended up in the hospital with a case of pneumonia, but thankfully she's on the mend and can hardly wait to meet her big sister. Congratulations, Joanne, to you and your family. We also want to extend congratulations to Kyle Farquharson of Mount Bridges. He is the 2021 Hugh Mitchell Western Fair 4-H Endowment Fund Scholarship recipient. This scholarship was established by the Western Fair Association and is awarded to an existing or former 4-H member from Middlesex County between the ages of 17 and 21 who is exemplary in his or her demonstration of the 4-H pledge. Kyle is attending the University of Guelph. I think that we should all start to call Thames Centre the mushroom capital of the county. As we see from our correspondence list, Shogun Mitaki recently announced the investment of $31.2 million to build a new production facility on Dundas Street. And when completed, this production facility will be double the size of Armatech and employ 300 people. Shogun Mitaki will grow, process, package, and distribute all from this space. Shogun joins White Crest mushroom and another new mushroom farm in Mausley that grows shiitake mushrooms, and they will all call Thames Centre home. Shogun Mitaki and another Thames Centre business, Algonquin Bridge, received grant money from the Provincial Southwestern Ontario Development Fund. The money invested in Algonquin Bridge will create 10 new jobs and help to retain 29 positions. It is fantastic to see this kind of investment in our communities. There has also been investment made in Strathroy Caradoc. Goss Global has purchased property in the industrial area, and they hope to start building within 6 months. Autotube has also announced an expansion, and these two announcements means new employment opportunities and job retention for long-standing employees. As things have opened up across the province, Southwest Middlesex has supported new recreation programs across their municipality. From Wardsville Craft Nights to new programming for children and adults in Glencoe and Appin, word has it that residents are signing up to get registered. There are positive things happening with economic development as 5 historical murals have been located throughout the municipality. And the business district in Glencoe is getting a mini makeover with new streetlights and a safer walking surface. There are other projects in the queue, but Southwest Middlesex is gaining ground one step at a time. We all know that in the best of times, it is difficult to raise money for great causes. Recently, the Middlesex Centre Fire Services team held their annual Boot Toll, raising money for muscular dystrophy. And this year, they raised a record $26,130. That is, as I say, record breaking. Congratulations to the team. Well done. At the next North Middlesex Council meeting, Council will be recognizing 3 students when they give out the first Youth Achievement Recognitions for North Middlesex. And while I don't know who the students are, I know you all join me in passing along our congratulations in advance of the formal announcement. In Luke and Biddulph, we are fortunate to have 2 community gardens, and the one in Granton has a program where produce is donated to the Elsa Craig Food Bank. And this year, our Granton gardeners donated 762 pounds of food for the food bank. And finally, in Adelaide Metcalfe, the innovative library kiosk has opened up. And at this time, I'm going to ask Lindsay to update us on how the kiosk works. I had the opportunity to be there for the ribbon cutting, and it is very slick technology. It's exciting that the residents of Adelaide Metcalfe now have this option to access our library catalog. So if Lindsay, if you want to walk us through this video, that would be great.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I'm not a professional. I'm no Vanna White, but this is a quick demo of how the unit works. So you'll see I just scanned my library card. I inputted my 4-digit PIN number, and I'm choosing books. You can look at a book, put it back, take it out, and then you just close the unit. It runs an inventory every time the unit is open and closed, and it checks items automatically out to you. So it prints a receipt and you're on your way. So it's a very simple process for people to follow. The unit is stocked with about 150 items right now, and we'll be working on a more professional video as part of our promotional plan. But I'm also happy to walk anyone through an on-site demo. I was out there this morning with Mary Gay Wilkins, and I'm happy to do that with anyone if you want to get your hands on the unit right now.
That's excellent. Thanks, Lindsay. And I would take her up on that offer because, as they say, it's slick. You see how it works, and it really is a great addition to our library system. So hopefully there's a lot of uptake. I know the staff at the office, and I think Councillor Smith will agree with me. The staff at the Adelaide Metcalfe office are certainly excited about having this opportunity. So congratulations to the library system for implementing that. As you can see, there are lots of good things happening in Middlesex. It seems that everywhere there is something to celebrate, and I hope you take the time to do so in your own communities because, as I say, great things are happening in Middlesex. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our minutes. Is there any business arising from the minutes? I haven't been made aware of anything. You've had opportunity to review the minutes from October 12th, our last meeting of County Council. And if nothing has to be amended, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to accept those and approve them as circulated. Councillor Mayhew and Councillor Elliott, all opposed. And that's carried. We don't have any deputations today. Any inquiries or notices of motion? Okay, no reports. So that takes us into new business. And Chris, I'll hand it over to you to talk about the boundary road agreement with the County of Huron.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Fairly straightforward report. As Council knows, we're bounded on the north with the County of Huron, and we've shared winter and summer maintenance activities along Mount Carmel and Greenway Drive along the northern border of Middlesex County. We've had that agreement in place for many decades, and we're just putting forward the renewed agreement to you today for approval for another decade of cooperation with Huron County for road maintenance of our boundary road system. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Any questions or comments on this? So seeing none, you do have the recommendation in front of you, and I would ask for a mover and a seconder for that recommendation. Councillor Vanderheyden and Councillor Cornelissen, all opposed? And that's carried. Thanks, Chris. Okay, moving on to MLPS, and this is a request for proposals for a 5-year master plan. And so at this time, I will turn it over to Neil to talk to us about this report.
Thanks, Madam
Recommendation.
Thanks, Madam Warden, and good afternoon, Council. I'm actually going to ask Colin Heisey to actually walk us through this, as he was the lead with the RFP committee on this. So, Colin, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Chief, and thanks, Warden. So on July 28th, 2021, Middlesex Land and Paramedic Service issued a request for proposal. This request sought a 5-year master plan for Middlesex Land and Paramedic Service. The plan will serve as an informative tool to address the emerging issues of our service, as well as also future opportunities. Specifically, the 5-year master plan will assess the capabilities of the service. It's going to look at informing our service planning and providing a go-forward approach, systemic approach for high-quality paramedic services. It'll also serve as a strategic blueprint for the service in respect to budget planning. So over the past month and a half, the evaluation committee has completed a fair and thorough evaluation. And we had 5 proponents that were evaluated during the selection committee. So the areas of evaluation included relevant experience, qualifications, pricing model, and the strength upon which the proposal provides for the objectives of the 5-year master plan. So having completed the plan or the evaluation committee, after ranking the proponents, is recommending that the RFP be made awarded to ORH. The bid price submitted by ORH to complete the plan was $159,800. And sorry, this report aligns with the strategic focus of promoting service excellence as Middlesex Line of Paramedic Service continues to review the service performance as well as its current and future needs to ensure the service is resourced properly. So the request for recommendation is that Middlesex County Council authorize and direct the Chief of Middlesex Line of Paramedic Service to execute a contract with the successful proponent. And I'm happy to answer any questions council may have.
Great. Well, thanks very much for that, Colin. Any questions or comments on Colin's report? I saw Councillor Vanderheyden's hand up.
Thank you. I was just looking for my mouse to get over to my mute button so I wouldn't be just talking into air here. Thank you, Madam Warden. Thank you, Colin, for that. I think it's important to regroup now and again and do a strategic plan and a look into the future for the next number of years. I don't have any problem with that. My question more has to do with process of the company that's going to be doing the work. Are they going to be looking at comparators and in the area to see, you know, what we should be doing, as well as looking at our own service to see what we are doing and how we can move that forward? And we do have, you know, a region here where we support rural and urban. So that's a very unique, I think, mix compared to some organizations. So that's about 3 questions in one. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Through the warden. So the plan is going to look at, it's going to take an inward look. It's going to look at our service inwardly. It's going to look at our corporate structure, what has been done, what we're doing. It's also going to look at regional comparators in Ontario. And it also takes, it looks even beyond our region. So it is, and the last time we completed a master plan, they did the same thing. They looked internally and then they continued to go out. So it does look at us. It looks at our comparators. It looks at us on a regional basis and also a provincial level. So it analyzes it holistically, if that answers your question.
Madam Warden, if
Did
I
you
may
want to?
add.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and through you, Madam Warden, to Councillor Vanderheyden as well. So ORH, when the committee went through the evaluations, is well known to paramedic services in Ontario. They've done quite a few. York, Simcoe County, which is very similar to Middlesex County, and most recently they completed a master plan for Huron County. So, and Huron was very pleased with the work that was done by this group. So they not only bring Ontario paramedic service experience, but they also bring international experience and trends. So we think that will be very helpful as we move forward with this review. Thank you.
Okay. Do you follow up, Councillor Vanderheyden?
If I could, Madam Warden,
Yep.
Thank you for those comments to both Colin and the Chief. And I appreciate the fact of what you said there about they even have international experience, because sometimes you don't know if it's working to the 100% or 150% unless you look at what somebody else is doing and then you go, wait a minute, that would work here. Or, you know what, we do this differently here and this is why. So I really appreciate that comment, because we want to make sure that we have all our bases covered and we have an excellent service. And if we can keep that moving in the right direction with ingenuity, and that's a good thing. So thank you.
Okay.
Madam Warden, just one
Yep.
thing on that. The last time we did this, or it might have been the time before that, we did actually get 2 great ideas that we implemented that were international. And Neil and I think that there is a lot we can learn from other jurisdictions, that's for sure. And some of the things that we do now and have been doing to great efficiency, there sometimes looking just in your neighborhood isn't enough, because often we follow a similar pattern. And looking outside to Europe and to some of the other places has really done well for us and helped us lead. There's there's some ideas still that I'd like to see implemented are things that I've seen happen internationally, including a paramedic SWAT team for special events, meaning for critical events. These are things that exist in other countries. Doesn't seem to be something that happens in Canada and Ontario very often, but there's a lot more we can learn from the international contingent, that's for sure.
Okay, any other comments or questions on the report that's been delivered? Okay, seeing none, then you do have the recommended motion in front of you, and I would ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Warwick and Councillor Richards. All opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, back to Chris, emergency bridge repair. And this is, of course, the Narren Bridge. So, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Warden. This is not a great news story, but we are very anxious to get started with this project. As Council knows, we had detected a serious deficiency in the Narren Bridge that necessitated its emergency closure earlier this summer. We've subsequently been able to open that back up to one lane of travel, but we do need to do a more substantial repair at this time and then do an additional repair in 2022 on the structure. So we went with our consultant, which is Dillon Consulting Limited, and went out and did a search of the marketplace to see if we could find a contractor who was willing to take on the work in short notice and able to do the repair to meet our specifications. We were fortunate to get 2 bids. The summary of the bids and the recommendation letter from Dillon Consulting is attached for your review. We are recommending that the project be awarded to McLean Taylor. They provided a low bid in the amount of just under $138,000, which does include HST and a provisionary $20,000. The two differences, as you can see, there's a significant price difference between the two quotes, are mainly related to material cost and with regards to access to get under the structure. They had different protocols that they proposed to be able to get access to basically weld plates to the beam to keep the bridge in its current condition and allow us to fully reopen it to traffic. We are coordinating with the contractor right now to get an estimated start date. There's likely to be a full 30-day closure of the bridge for them to undertake this work. The work all has to be complete before Christmas of this year. And once details are finalized, we will publicize that and let people know when to expect that closure to start and when it is likely to be reopened to the public. So we are taking the money from reserves to pay for this work in 2021. And of course, we will create a capital works project as part of the 2022 budget in order to pay back the borrowing from reserves to undertake these repairs. And my recommendation is McLean Taylor be awarded this contract and the work can proceed immediately. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Questions on this? Councillor Ropp.
Thank you. Through the warden, Chris. So I'm in support. I'm glad to see that this is getting done to get the bridge opened again. I was wondering, do you have a time frame when you'll know the scope of the next phase, like for 2022?
Yeah, through the warden to Councillor Ropp, we are evaluating right now the structural capacity. Essentially, there's 5 beams supporting this bridge. So we're evaluating the structural capacity of the remainder of the beams under this bridge to see whether or not we can essentially lift the bridge up and just replace that outside beam. That would be hopefully the least disruptive repair. As far as timelines for that, we're not sure. Again, we're working with our consultant and actually working closely with a couple of different contractors to talk about how much work that would be. That's the best case scenario. Failing that, again, we're evaluating other options and alternatives with regards to the more serious structural repair to the structure next year.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments from council? Okay, seeing none, you have a recommendation in front of you, and I would ask for a mover and a seconder on this, please. Councillor Ropp and a seconder, Councillor Brennan. All opposed? And that's carried. Now we're going to flip back to Neil, and this is a report on increasing call demand and system pressures, which we're all too familiar with. So Neil, over to you on this one.
Thank you, Madam Warden, and through you to Council. I'll just open this up, and I'm going to ask Deputy Chief Bennett to provide some background, but we identified earlier in the year that we, Middlesex Line Paramedic Service, was seeing increased call demand and increased offloads, and that's continued. And we committed to coming back to Council with an update with regards to this issue. So that's the report that's before you today. I know as we go through this as well, that the Warden has been a strong advocate in working with LHSC, and I'll let maybe the Warden during this report provide some comments on that, but certainly that's been instrumental. But clearly we believe we're at a point in time that we do need to come back to Council and seek some approval on this. But I'm going to let Deputy Chief Bennett maybe provide you a bit of an operational lens on what's going on and why we are coming to you today. So, Deputy Chief.
Thank you, Chief. And through you, Warden, to provide a brief high-level overview, right now, as we're looking at our call demand has been steadily increasing throughout the year. We're on track right now to exceed 70,000 emerge calls throughout the year. Our call demand is no longer being impacted by COVID. We're seeing increasing calls. We're seeing increasing patients' severity levels are increasing as well, which leads to increased offload delays. In addition to that, we are seeing the total number of offload delays that paramedics are experiencing are also increasing along with their lengths as well. The impact that this has on our system, as our resources are being tied up to do increasing emerge calls and are being tied up in the emergency departments, we have less resources that are available in the system to be able to respond to calls. Following a fluid deployment model, units will be pulled from areas of low call volume, such as the county. So we could potentially end up with units being moved from Lucan, Kamoka, Dorchester, Park Hill. They'll be responding into the City of London to do emergency calls. This also has an impact on our neighbors being Oxford, Huron, Perth, Elgin, as well as Lambton will be pulled into the county to service calls in those areas as well. So these are some of the pressures that we're experiencing, and these are some of the things that are going to lead to increased response times and the lack of resources that are available. What we're trying to do is, as we start to push more resources into the city, we want to be able to send resources back out into the county so that the county is also represented, that there's those resources that are available there, and that will help keep response times lower so that they'll be able to travel those distances that they're needed and be there when they're called upon.
I'll just maybe, Madam Warden, through you to Council, just sort of add on to Adam's comments, and thank you for that. The reason why the report is coming to Council today is because this increase in call demand and offloads has been sustained and has not let up. And often we're seeing calls on each shift, so day shift and night shift, where our dispatch center is holding calls as well. And as a result, we're waiting to clear vehicles so we can service the next call. And this has not let up. And often when we are looking at upstaffing, it is last minute. And the challenge that we're having is staff are either not available or they're committed to work elsewhere. And it's not always favorable for us to be able to bring in staff. So what we're proposing is with these 3 12-hour vehicles, one would start at 11 to 11, 1 to 1, and 3 to 3, which is really when we're starting to build up the momentum throughout the day, the offloads as well, and then into the evening. So it gives us additional coverage at peak periods of time, more stable resources that if we need to upstaff, we can. I will commit to Council, as we always have done, if we see a break in this sustained pattern, then we will obviously reduce the commitment and the additional staffing. The one note as well is that this is coming before Council for approval so that it is identified to the Ministry of Health as a Council approved increase in our 2021 budget, so that it is eligible for 50% funding from the province as part of our 2022 funding envelope, which Council may recall we have done this in the past where it was Council approved and we received the funding from there. So Maybe at this point, Madam Warden, I'll hand the chair back to you if there are any questions or additional comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Chief. And Adam, that was a good update. Maybe just before I open it up to council, I will let you know that I guess it's probably about 10 days ago, Bill and I, and the chief, Adam, we had a meeting with representatives from LHSC, as well as joining us was the City of London manager and the deputy mayor. And, you know, in the past, there's been no secret, we have tried to advocate to LHSC for the ongoing issue of offload delay and try to work with them to come to some sort of solution. And it seems to be a topic that is brought back every year with no solution. I think we all agree that this is not a unique problem to Middlesex London. This is a systematic issue that is facing emergency departments and paramedic services across the province. And the chief can share with you stories from, you know, with his colleagues from Eastern Ontario, that sort of thing. And we all agree that there has to be some changes. I think what I walked away, and I think Bill can back me up on this, the meeting that we had 10 days ago was very different in tone than we've had before. I think that there's a real willingness on the part of the administration of LHSC to try to come up with some solutions. So today we look at the recommendation in front of us. It looks like we're just throwing money at the problem. And as I said yesterday at the authority board meeting, we can't just do that. We have to come up with some solutions, but it's not going to happen overnight. What I see as different is that there seems to be more of an understanding from the administration of what the issue is, and a willingness. The other thing was having the city representatives there at this meeting gave the city an understanding of what it is we've tried to communicate with them over the years of what the issue is and the pressures that MLPS is facing. So they have a better understanding. And I really see this as an opportunity to try and find some solutions. In fact, you know, just in that hour discussion, you know, there were, and I can't remember off the top of my head, that the chief will know better than I am, but there were just a couple of quick wins that between having the conversation between LHSC administration and MLPS, that they could see, you know, well, that is something that we can do today. That is something that we can do in 3 months. So there's a couple of quick wins that I think can be implemented in the near future that will make some incremental changes. But as I say, the one thing that I want to communicate to council is, with the administration at LHSC, with having the city at the table, there seems to be more understanding and a more of a willingness to work together to try to find some solutions. And Bill, I don't know if there's anything you want to add in before I open it back up to council.
One thing you often say whenever you talk about that meeting is that it was also good for us too, because it was a real sharing of information back to us. And we can't lose sight of the fact, and the warden's definitely not losing sight of the fact, that the hospital is facing unprecedented times. They can, you know, we can show you the stats of what the hospital is facing too. And so that was a real revelation for us about what they're facing coming into their doors. The warden and I both looked at each other whenever we saw just what kind of issues they're facing now compared to what they were facing last year. The other thing too is just an acknowledgement that there is actually a problem. This was sort of the warden and I don't think we could stop talking about just how impressed we were with the leadership at the hospital for a variety of reasons. But this was a very refreshing meeting and felt like a true partnership, recognizing there's a problem, recognizing that we have to work together and that there's not one magic bullet. This was a pretty good first step for us, I'd say, Warden.
I would wholeheartedly agree. I think Councillor DeVete has sat in on a meeting a few years ago with LHSC, and, you know, gone were the walls, the defense, you know, this is, you know, there wasn't any of that. And while we could maybe debate data, it was interesting that whatever graphs we were sharing, whether it was our graphs, whether it was LHSC graphs, they all showed the same picture. And I think that that was quite telling that of the acknowledgement of the whole systematic issue that we're facing. So on that note, I will open it up for questions or comments from any members of council, either for Neil or Adam on this. Councillor DeVete.
Thank you to you and to Bill and the LH, our paramedic services for the work and the reports that we're getting right now, because I'm taking hope from what I'm hearing that there are changes that are going to come. I think we all recognize that there are stresses, systemic issues that are hard to deal with, but I guess to echo Bill's point earlier about some of the changes that have been implemented in paramedic services over the years, that they've come from other places, to the extent that you're having good conversations with your colleagues and peers across the table in different contexts. Yeah, let's not argue about the minute details, but recognize that there are big issues that need to be solved. To the extent that everyone's open to talking about them and looking for solutions is really encouraging, because throwing more money at everything isn't always the only solution. So thank you for both of those.
Councillor Vanderheyden, I saw your hand up.
Yep, thank you. Through the warden. Well, I'm going to vote in favor of this recommendation, because I think our first utmost responsibility is to the citizens we serve, and we need to make sure that we have all the services in place, and that's the base of my decision. However, I've been around long enough that I know that this is not just a problem from this year. This is something that goes even pre-pandemic, pre everything. We've had these delays and a number of issues. So I'm really glad to hear what you're all saying about the fact that you had a great meeting and that people are willing to talk to each other now and make the comments to try to find solutions. But my concern is, this always seems backwards to me, because this is something that now we have to deal with and take care of, which is fine. That's what we do. But where's the province in all of this? Like, I mean, if they're coming to the table next year, because that's our budget year, where are they now when we've got these issues that we really need to have conversations about, solutions to, and funding that makes the system sustainable?
Well, who wants to tackle that question?
I can take a shot at it. I think the province is there. As much as we talk about the hospital, I think the warden will agree that the province actually has, in recent years, been really good partners in helping us with ideas to at least mitigate what we're seeing. And the real difference, I think, that we're seeing now, Joanne, compared to other times in terms of offload delay, is it's powered by a new phenomena. It's, before we would just talk about aging and how the call volumes were increasing and things that were happening back in the hospital. You remember all those things. It's multifaceted now, including population growth. I mean, this is a fast growing region. So I always say that ambulance costs related to this, and the warden, I think, agrees, is like the tail at the end of the dog. There's a lot of things that happen before you get to that tail, and we're the ones that see the cost implications on the municipal side. So I completely agree with you. But there is no one magic bullet. I went to the province today and said, can you do this to fix the problem? It is multifaceted what we're dealing with. And the good news is the province is listening on many of those facets. Short of building a new hospital or other things that recognize the dramatic growth in population. I think we should, warden, probably share with council the fact, and also the chart that the hospital was sharing with us, just about how many people are at their door. It is unprecedented. It's the largest in their history.
That is in the last 10 days in the history of LHSC. They saw the most people come through their doors in one day. So what's happening in our healthcare system, it's unprecedented.
And when
so can I ask a question to that,
yep.
Bill, through Kathy? So what do they feel the cause of that is? Is it the pandemic? Is it mental health? Is it what is it, because a lot of the walk-in clinics are not accepting patients as readily as they used to because of the pandemic? Like, is there a variety of reasons, I suppose, that's making that happen?
Well, we can hypothesize. I think a lot of the things you mentioned are definitely it. We talked about children's services as well. We talked about a lot of things, but we have to remember that this is a massively fast growing region. We have communities in this area in the north that are doubling in size. And when we looked at the university hospital statistics for what is coming to the door, the warden and I were blown away because the people that are coming to University Hospital are older and their challenges are greater than they ever have been before. And I said to the warden when we were on the way out the door, you know, I don't think anybody will be shocked to learn that the people buying those big houses in the county are not healthy 21-year-olds for the most part. Those are big houses. And so we're getting a lot of new population. And I think the warden and I were surprised to just see what the hospital is dealing with at their end. And then of course, there's a number of things that happen in the middle, and then we see the result at the other end. So yeah, I can't tell you that the hospital said, here's the reason why, because they didn't. I think I'm just hypothesizing based upon the conversation the warden and Neil and I had.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many stresses, even just, you know, the stress on taking away an emergency department and switching it to an urgent care center with only certain hours, and then they get filled up to the point where they can't take any more. Well, where do those, you know, people that really only have urgent care issues, where do they go? You know, it's a systematic issue. There's so many pieces to it. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Adam or Neil.
I'll let it go at that. I think it was captured. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Councillor Richards.
Yeah, thank you, Warden. A question for Neil, I think. A dispatch question in particular. When you get in that situation, Neil, where all your vehicles are out, the county ones will come into the city. Now you might need Huron County to come and back us up or whatever. How does the dispatch know that right up front? Or what kind of a time delay it goes through to get that Huron County ambulance to come down and cover?
Through you, Madam Warden, to Councillor Richards. So it actually occurs in real time. So as county vehicles are being drawn into the city, then the neighboring counties, so Huron County, Lambton County, are moved into a strategic location to cover their area as well as cover Middlesex County. It isn't obviously optimal, but that's part of the reason why we're trying to stem this. And it's been a bit of the challenge, but certainly dispatch is part of the equation, and it is one of the areas that Madam Warden and Bill and I have talked about, and it's gone back as far as 2011 with then Warden Vander Hayden, who will remember that discussion. So it's part and parcel of the systemic issue that Bill discussed.
Okay. Any follow-up, Brad?
That's good, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, seeing none, then you do have the recommended motion in front of you, and I would ask for a mover and a seconder on this one, please. Councillor Richards and Councillor Elliott. All opposed, and that's carried. Okay, councillor comments or other business. Councillor Cornelison.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I wanted to share with members of council, as you will recall, that a number of months ago, the Thames Valley School Board established a rural education task force with sitting members from Elgin, Oxford, and Middlesex. They've reached a point where they're now prepared to hold the community consultations. The dates that have been established and the locations. So Thames Centre at the Dorchester Arena on November 15th from 7 to 8:30. Glencoe in the library room on November 22nd from 7 to 8:30. Now the chair is waiting to hear for confirmation from Southwest that is available. And then North Middlesex at the community center in Park Hill from 7 to 8:30 as well. There are some details on what the content of these presentations is, and I can certainly forward that to members of council if they wish.
Okay, that's great, Adrian. Thank you for sharing that. That might be a good idea if we could get that information out to everybody around the horseshoe. Any questions on that for Adrian? Okay, thank you. Any other comments from council? Okay, then we'll move into bylaws. Marcy.
We have number 7136, a bylaw to authorize the signing of a boundary road agreement with Huron County. Number 7137, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the October 26, 2021 meeting of County Council.
Thank you. Can I get a mover and a seconder for the first and second reading of the bylaws, please? Councillor Vanderheyden and Councillor DeVitt. All opposed? And that's carried. And then for the third and final reading, please. Councillor Warwick and Councillor Mayhew. All opposed? And that's carried. Moving into the Committee of the Whole, we do have a delegation this afternoon, and it is from our friends at SCORE. And at this point, I would like to welcome Kim Earls, who has joined us, and pass it over to you. It's great to see you, Kim, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It's nice to see you all. I'm going to start the presentation by apologizing about my internet connection. If I freeze or don't respond to questions immediately, my apologies for that. So yeah, I believe the presentation is that you have that in your package, and so I'll just jump right in. So as you know, SCORE has 3 priorities as part of our strategic planning, and that is infrastructure supporting economic development, workforce supporting economic development, and sector development, which is focusing on agriculture and food. So we'll just run through the initiatives that we've been undertaking as of late. So our infrastructure, we have been committing a lot of time and resources to transportation. As you know, one of the many elected officials across the region that has been appointed to the Ministry of Transportation Mayor's Task Force was from the SCORE Board of Directors. I know we also have folks here from Middlesex that are on that as well, but it does give us a direct line to shaping the transportation across southwestern Ontario, and that is certainly something that we have been advocating for and encouraging Ministry of Transportation to consider as part of their master transportation planning. In addition to that, we have made some good strides in the community transportation portfolio, specifically intercommunity transportation. As most of you are likely aware, we have last year and the year before really undertaken some strong coordination activities and have entered into memorandum of understanding with a number of municipal partners who operate community and intercommunity transportation systems, and that is branded under the Southwest Community Transit Network brand. And so what that does, just as a recap, it allows the individual systems to retain their own branding while also taking advantage of being part of that larger, wider network. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Middlesex council members who have undertaken in supporting and taking the transit systems across the region. That's been an exciting and certainly fun part of promoting intercommunity transportation. Some of the real benefits of that, though, are cost savings in terms of shared RFPs for technology, which we recently undertook. And we also recently did a project whereby we uploaded all the transit routes to the Workforce Planning Board's job seeker map, so that if someone was seeking employment, they could see where transit routes were going in addition to the employment space itself. And then we've had the opportunity, again, largely through support and connections right here at Middlesex County, is to connect with larger centers in our area and really look at what a coordinated inter-community transit system looks like. We have applied to the Rural Transit Solutions Fund, which is a federal fund, to do a system-wide review. And what that will do will help us get a very clear picture on inventory of all transit options across the SCORE region, and how we might best move forward in the future in terms of efficiencies, what types of routes are being used most, what times, all of those information and planning pieces, which I think will be really important, not only for the entire region, so for the interconnectedness of the system, but certainly really important for individual county systems as a whole. And we've had the great opportunity of working through the SCT Technical Committee with Taylor Mooney here at Middlesex, and of course, Councillor Warwick is the chair of the executive committee. So we're excited about some of the progress made there. In addition, we have been spending a fair bit of time on short line rail with the onset of the pandemic recently. Certainly the agriculture and manufacturing sectors, among others, have been facing some real supply chain management issues. And so we want to ensure that we have options for logistics and transportation across the region. And we are looking at a short line rail system that currently runs from just east of St. Thomas into Norfolk County. And some of the businesses along there that would have probably the most effect in Middlesex County would be the IGCP, which is located in Elgin County. And as you, some of you may know, that's certainly a key transfer point for grain farmers across the region, and most certainly in Middlesex County. And again, continuing to support the broadband efforts to hopefully ensure that we all have great broadband and in the very near future, and continue to support the expansion of the natural gas as part of our energy portfolio. Next slide, please. And now this is a little bit more about the community transportation. I won't go into a lot of detail on this just in the sake of time, but you know, one of the things that I did want to just note is the opportunity through Middlesex County and for Middlesex County in having those discussions at that regional level and looking at linkages. We were approached by another group that is part of the Grand River Transit recently. And again, they were looking to connect sort of Wellington, Waterloo area and Guelph, Stratford into the Southwest community transit system. And so through some of the positive work we've done, certainly there's opportunity to utilize those connections for workforce attraction and development without putting additional pressures on things like housing in the immediate future. So just an additional point I wanted to make there. Next slide, please. And in the human capital, so we've done a lot of workforce related partnering, again, both in a leading and supporting role on various components of that over the past year. So we've really focused on doing advocacy work for the seasonal agricultural worker program, which is part of the temporary foreign worker program. Again, a lot of issues related to COVID-19 and our agricultural sector. And so we certainly had the opportunity to speak on behalf of our member municipalities in regards to that. In addition, we continue to provide support as original partners in two post-secondary programs that support domestic capacity within the agricultural workforce, and those being Fanshawe College, the Agri Management program, which is offered at the London and Simcoe campus, and most recently the Conestoga College Agricultural Equipment Operator program, and that's offered in the County of Brant. And a little bit about that program, it is really a, they've taken their very popular heavy equipment operator program, and really tailored and looked at the types of equipment and needs that are currently across the agricultural industry and tailored that to that sector. So that has been a really exciting new program that we've been able to be a part of. And again, that speaks to our partnerships with post-secondary institutions across the region and beyond. And in addition to that, we continue to support workforce planning boards and their project and other workforce initiatives. And again, some of those are in a more supporting role, and we continue to see the great value and importance of those. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Sorry, thank you. Again, this is a little bit of a recap. The agricultural sector, as we've had the opportunity to work with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture in a few really important projects, one being the Feeding Your Future. SCORE's portion of that was working with various commodity organizations, again, to build that agricultural workforce capacity, highlighting some of the workforce needs and opportunities for the various commodities. And as well as that, we partnered with the OFA on the Always in Season brochure, which is more of a promotional and marketing brochure, but certainly featured all of our partner counties. And we worked with staff on highlighting those businesses within their particular region. So certainly Kara was instrumental in providing direction and information for that project. And then ongoing advocacy and connecting. So over the last year, we've had 25 delegations and meetings with cabinet ministers regarding issues specific to this region. We continue to have ongoing communications with other levels of government supporting regional and individual county efforts as we are asked and approached, and that becomes a valuable part to individual county efforts. And we're continuing to collaborate with other organizations such as the Elgin, Middlesex, Oxford Workforce Planning and Development Board, and with WOWC. So recently, last year, I guess, WOWC received RED funding to access some data, and through SCORE staff, we were able to collaborate and disseminate that data for the WOWC partners and offer specific highlights also for the SCORE partners. So that's another partnership that we're very proud and pleased with, and we anticipate that will continue on. In addition to the funding that SCORE received itself over the past year to leverage your partner contribution, we've also provided 12 letters of support for other organizations that resulted in successful funding for their specific projects and initiatives as well. Next slide, please. Pardon me. And so just a review of our partnerships. So again, a 1 in 5 vote at the board table. Recognition SCORE has earned a positive reputation through fantastic board engagement and direction to staff. You know, we've had the ability and the direction from our board to not only gather the information needed to help us make informed decisions, but to actually provide some action-oriented projects that help us take on some of these complex and large issues. And then probably one of the most important things that was brought to our attention very recently by our current chair is not only is the value of SCORE year over year an important part of the economic development across the region, but the benefits are cumulative over time. And so, you know, sometimes it's a little harder on some years to point to exactly what we've done that exact year, but over time, we've certainly really strengthened the 5-county partnership and the region. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to mention that as well. And next slide, please. And just some kind of final partnership positive thoughts is we have accomplished a great deal as a 5-county partnership. And I know that the board and certainly myself view us as an organization that is good neighbors working together for the good of all. So I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation, Kim. We certainly appreciate the updates, and I will open it up to council for any points of discussion. Councillor Warwick.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I just want to thank Kim for her hard work. She does a fantastic job of keeping everybody informed and really reaching out all the time and working very hard on behalf of all the 5 counties. I know those delegations that she's talked about, the information that she's provided everyone to work with is current and much appreciated by the provincial government when we bring them forward. And I think we've made some real success lately with them. So I thank you again, Kim, for all your hard work.
Okay. And I think I saw Councillor Vanderheyden's hand up.
Yes, ma'am, you did. Thank you, Madam Warden. I just want to say thank you to Kim and your board. I know Allison's being very generous there and humble, but in that conversation that we just had, that we listened to you talk about the PowerPoint presentation and the things that you've done, I wrote down just a few, and I started after you started, so I haven't even hit half of them. You're talking about transportation, and that is vital to our area as small, urban, and rural. You're talking about agriculture. We are an agriculture breadbasket in the area. That, you know, we need to pay attention to what's going on in agriculture. You're talking about education in agriculture and in business. What are you hearing on the news? I mean, I can show you a couple of news clips from yesterday where they're talking about people in business looking for labor, skilled labor, and how do we train them? You talked about your successes, but you're also helping other people be successful by helping with funding. You know, all of these things are not just little things. And I know that SCORE at the beginning, we got together for the right reason, and we had a couple of rocky roads there. But I think you're doing exactly what we as a region need you to do to fight for these 5 counties, because everything you're doing is valid right now across the country. And I don't say that lightly. I just really feel that you guys need the credit for doing what you're doing. And there you have the credit from me as just a regular counselor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderheyden. Any other points of discussion that have been brought up or would like to be brought up? Councillor Richards and then Councillor Mayhew.
Thank you, Warden. Just want to thank him too as well, because I've served as board treasurer for the last 3 years now, and boy, we get it right down to the penny. And that's the last thing I'd ever thought I would be as the treasurer, but me and money don't really see eye to eye too good. But Kim really keeps it right to the penny, and she's done a great job. So with what money we got to work with, she's done good. So thanks, Kim.
Thank you for that, Brad and Councillor Mayhew.
Thank you, Madam Warden, very much. Kim, I enjoyed that presentation. Kim, I say this with all respect. I congratulate you and the board for this. I do advocate on behalf of my municipality, Southwest Middlesex. I just want to remind you that don't forget us in your equation and your long-term planning. Southwest Middlesex is the only place that VIA stops between Chatham and London. So we're a strategic focal point in terms of rail transportation. We do have passenger pickup and departure and arrival at Glencoe. So it is a part of the hub. We're called the 4 Counties region for our geographical attributes. We do touch 4 counties. We also, our strongest industry and our most respected industry is agriculture. We have and will need transportation for not only seasonal but migrant workers in agriculture as well. So in terms of our geophysical positioning, in terms of the train that already stops in Glencoe, and the attributes that are required for an agricultural workforce, which are extremely critical to our area, in your long-term planning, please bring up the subject of Southwest Middlesex. Sometimes I feel left out as a mayor in this conversation, and I would appreciate you looking at us in the future. And thank you again. It was an excellent presentation, and my congratulations to the board. Thank you. Madam Warden, I'm done.
Thank you, Councillor Mayhew. Any other comments or questions that you've got while Kim has joined us? Okay, I don't see any hands up. So thanks again, Kim, for the update on where SCORE is at. And we certainly look forward to further updates and more get-togethers as conferences begin to reopen. And I know that there's been a lot of joint advocacy presentations and that sort of thing that we've been able to see you participate in. So we look forward to seeing you at further conferences and events. So thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next up on our agenda is a report from our CAO with regards to considerations surrounding an archive. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Bill.
How does that look on your screen, Warden?
Mute. It looks fine. We can, it's, you know, it's got the large,
that
that's
better?
much better.
Okay. Okay, thanks everybody. I tried to do what the warden and I said we'd do at the last meeting, which is just look at some previous discussion points, and I added some options. I wasn't really necessarily clear, so I did ask some questions about what options meant. It can mean a lot of different things, and I hope I captured it. So we'll see how I do. I said this is at least the third iteration of the same question and consideration. That's fine. I was thinking that it might be the fourth or fifth, because I remember this dating back, the very first time was actually when Marg Rule was librarian, and I think it was in my second year here, and we had a good discussion about archives, and it's often one of those types of discussions that's linked to something. And so it's had a few iterations of discussion that is linked to the future of the county building. And it's had a few iterations that are just on its own. And many of the discussion points were relatively consistent, right back to the first time I remember it being discussed in like 2001. And so what I wanted to do today was give you just sort of an overview of some of the things I've heard. I'll try to attribute those things to that are councils, and then some that are my own observations, so there's no confusion. But I'd say the most comprehensive discussion was in 2011, with additional discussions in 2013. Council had a lot of discussion whenever the new Street Center was being opened at Fanshawe Pioneer Village. Some of you remember that discussion. But as I mentioned, most of the discussions actually were linked to the future of the county building, and that certainly was the case in 2013. So this is a slide that's intended to talk about a consideration that councils of the past have had. There really are four buckets of types of things that county tax dollars could be spent on. Often in the past, this is where discussions related to the nice to do type of things starts and stops. And several times when archives were discussed, it started and stopped with these two slides without much else in terms of consideration. And that's because there are these different types of services. There's mandatory services where we have a legislative responsibility. And in many cases in the county, those are funded to the legislative minimum. And where does that come from? It actually comes from the Municipal Act, where there's spheres of influence, things that we're actually legislatively responsible for, things like Ontario Works, Land Ambulance, libraries, long-term care, et cetera, et cetera. We have 36 different business areas, and there's legislation associated with almost all of them, separate legislation associated with almost all of them. And those are what I would call our mandatory services. I don't think you'll find the term mandatory services in Municipal Act, but I think you get my point that that's where a lot of these things come from, is from legislative requirements. The second category I created, and this is where when we go from mandatory services into investments in mandatory services, those are things that aren't necessarily legislated, but they do help to improve the service that we are mandated to provide. So when you invest in those types of things, that might be like community paramedicine, or if you wanted to build an additional long-term care home or a hospice, there's a long list of potential of services where there could be investments in mandatory services. I say that between mandatory services and investment in mandatory services, there's a friction point there. Joanne, I hope you don't mind, but I'll say Joanne's words are often in my head whenever I suggest investment in mandatory services, because she asks a very good question. What does this lead to? Is this now part of a downloading? Is this now part of some responsibility we have? Because just moving from mandatory to investments in mandatory services, the most recent time I remember this was in transit. That is a friction point where you have to make a real hard decision. Critical analysis has to be done. And I'm often asked very, very difficult questions about the sustainability, the need, many factors, just from moving from mandatory to investment in mandatory services. And then there's another category that exists, and that's local services. This is a third category, again, with a higher threshold of support required than for the other two. So that would be like local services, IT, and legal. And again, I get asked a lot of questions. You may not see them very often, but they come mostly during budget time about, are we full cost recovery? Because these are designed to lower the cost for the common taxpayer. And these services are critical to our success as a county, but they are full cost recovery. These are not ones that are going on the backs of the county taxpayer. Which leads me to the fourth category. And these are discretionary programs. And I remember a former MPP for this area who was also on county council saying to me, the hardest part of being an MPP is that every day someone walks in with, you know what a nice to do project would be in Middlesex County? And there is no shortage of nice to do projects. County councils grappled with a large number of these over the years. These are programs where there's no requirement to provide the service. They're not investments necessarily in a service that we are required to provide. They're really nice to do. So hospital funding is actually the best example I could possibly think of. This is a debate point that happened, and it was a really high bar for the hospital group that came in looking for money for the hospital funding. Some of you were around the table for that discussion, and it was a very difficult discussion. A farm tax rebate is another example of a discretionary program that's a nice to do, that is not really what we've collected county dollars for. Each one of those had immense analysis that lasted for a long time and very deep reviews before ultimately not being determined things that we would do at the County of Middlesex. So I just wanted to explain that this is certainly the use of county tax dollars, and what the public is providing us that money for is often a place where the discussion about archives start with county council members in the past. I think the archive and museum project definitely falls into this category. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, there's a long list of potential nice to do projects. I could sit here all day and tell you of nice to do projects that fall within this category. We hear about them often. Another thing that this was actually the most prominent in the last iteration of the discussion. There was one particular councillor that talked about this often, that much of our history is shared with the City of London, and many of our foundational communities are now within the boundaries of the City of London. In the very first time we looked at this, it was a joint development project we were considering. This is a long time ago now. I'm going back 18, 19 years, looking at a joint development project between the city and the county. And often council members will say, well, if we're going to do this, it has to be with the city because so much of our history is shared. And so I won't say more about that, but that is often a point that came up in previous discussions. There was slightly greater interest, greater than zero interest at the city at the time in pursuing that. And again, these conversations about shared history often would be tied to a building. They'd look at, okay, wouldn't the county building be a great place for the archive back in those days? And what would that look like? And so often that was part of the conversation. I might have skipped one. Excuse me, Warden. Yeah, so the Which Middlesex is another offshoot of that discussion. because there's been multiple versions. Now, this is another councillor in the past brought forward this issue, that large portions of the county's history is based in other counties. And this version of Middlesex was created in 1993, as we all know, but there have been multiple versions over the two centuries. I think I counted one day 17 different versions of Middlesex County. And the reason why this is often brought up is because it was used at the time to display why a local approach is better, because because many of the historical records that are important to, say, Southwest may be from a different type of history than those for North Middlesex that was part of a different county for a long period of time. So this is a discussion point that was probably the most prevalent the very first time that this was discussed around the county council table. I often hear this, I just captured this from the archive committee's presentation. This is something that is consistently discussed. And it was brought up last time. Records management policies are not something Middlesex County is looking to create. It's something we have. As well, there's really, I can't find any evidence of how an archivist would be better to assist with MFIP or a freedom of information request through quicker retrieval of information. That's a really tough one too. And these are all points that were brought up before and we discussed, we actually did a lot of discussion, or council did a lot of discussion about that. The idea of an environmentally controlled facility is important as well. That was an important discussion previously because that was difficult to do in the county building. So that's why that came up as well. Just like last time, whenever the archive group just came just a few weeks back, the question of whether original records or whether this should be in this day and age a digital archive is a question that was a component. You got to remember that the last time this was discussed, digital record keeping was just starting to come to the forefront. It wasn't as prevalent as it is now. So many wanted to sort of see where that went before committing to something. And then, of course, this freeing up of space is something that came up in the past as well. A conversation point that local councillors had to acknowledge and look at themselves. And so that these are all things that have come up in previous conversations. I did hear in the past as well, several times, and this was talked about, that municipal staff are asking for this. I can't speak to it in the past. I know that no one's applied for modernization funding to address this perceived local issue. And again, I'm talking about municipal records here. I don't even recall them asking to pursue anything for local history records. I think I've probably participated in 200 or so local CAOs meetings. I don't remember this issue ever being raised, not as a priority or even being raised. And I have a quote there from one of the local CAOs whenever I started asking around about where the pressure for this is coming from municipal staff. This is something that comes up often too, which is that there's an efficiency argument. And I was asked to speak to this last time this was discussed at council, and my opinion hasn't changed in that I have a legislative responsibility that I share with Marcy for records. It is not efficient for me to put my records that I'm responsible for municipally into a centralized facility, not only getting them there, but getting them back out. Especially since geographically Middlesex County is very large. I can tell you, I know where our records are, and I certainly would not find it efficient to go to some centralized location if I was a local municipal clerk or CAO, or if I was a county one. I just don't see this argument. I haven't seen this at all for many years. And I think it's questionable at best, and it seems to be one of the top 3 arguments for why municipal records need to be in an archive. And at the last time we discussed this, council asked me to give reasons why we wouldn't do that. And I think those are fairly easy to do. Another thing you have to know is that we do have a records retention policy. We have a bylaw in terms of how we keep records. Going to keeping paper municipal records past their destruction date, that would be inefficient. And it certainly would change our processes and change our retention policies. That is something that is far from what we do now, especially in this age of digitization. I can't imagine what that would look like, considering the amount of records that there are if we kept every paper document going forward. Oh, sorry, not really sure why that's happening. The other thing I hear a lot is that it's a municipal requirement, and that's true. It is true that we need to keep our municipal records. I take exception, though, whenever there's a suggestion that we're not doing that. There's absolutely zero need for an archive to protect municipal records that are county records. Zero. If there was, I would be the first one to stand in front of you and say, holy cow, we need to fix this. We've invested a huge amount of money in making sure that our records are retained. The legislation for municipalities related to records retention is very clear. It's not like it's something that you have to guess at. I think all municipalities have record retention programs. I'd be very surprised if they don't. And I don't know if any municipalities are struggling with storage. In fact, I've heard a number of anecdotal stories of excess storage capacity as a result of digitization. And I'm not aware of any municipalities that have not headed towards highly searchable digitization for municipal records. This is a conversation point amongst CAOs about how they are digitizing their records as fast as they can. So I do hear that quite often. In terms of county records management, there was a couple of questions that were posed whenever the local municipal presentations were being done on archives. This was one slide. I know exactly where those records are. They're directly below my office. You can go look at them today in the vault. There was a question raised about how long would it take us to get the 1933 minutes? I think it took Marcy 67 seconds to send me this picture. And she's a fairly quick walker, I'll grant you that, but that's not too long to go and get the record. And this is something that Marcy and I and the entire team are extremely proud of. So to hear that we need to address this issue, or an issue, is a little discouraging, frankly, because this is something we're extremely proud of. The other thing that was a consideration in the past is just how many local archive and museum facilities are in place at the local level. There really is nothing stopping a municipality as passionate about this issue from addressing the issue of local historical records to create a local facility. And some have. That has happened. There's no reason why it can't happen in other municipalities if there is a need for it. And I've heard too that we haven't invested in that. But that's not true. We actually have, through the infrastructure fund. I can point to it very directly where we've invested dollars into making sure that the funds are there for these types of programs. And I'd be happy to bring a report to council for anyone else that's interested in creating one of these facilities using the infrastructure fund. I think that this is my view. I think records should be retained in local municipalities. I've talked about the inefficiency, but also there's nothing that I would do. There's nothing that could convince me, short of a council declaration, that I should give up access to or give up control of municipal records. I wouldn't put them in the hands of someone else because I have a legislative responsibility for those records, as does Marcy. The idea of putting them in the hands of someone else, I just can't even imagine. And I also think that what local history is should be decided locally. I've seen lots of anecdotal stories about what's of historical value. And I think that is a good job for a curator when it comes to local history records. And there's certainly nothing really stopping municipalities that see the merit. Some people have a good system for this, some don't. There's nothing wrong with having an intermunicipal services agreement to fund a service that would look at local history. But I do think we have to recognize that we already have a number of strong local facilities in place, and I would not want to see any duplication of effort on behalf of the taxpayers. As I mentioned, use of the county building is often tied to this. I think it's actually tied to it again, because I've seen a couple of times now where council discussions related to archives in the past have morphed, or related to the county building have morphed into debate on archives. It seems like it's happened again, because I was surprised to learn that we're moving into the county building. I haven't heard that from council. I haven't put a report together on that, and I wouldn't recommend it. So I was surprised that this is what was being presented to the local municipalities. And so I'll just leave it at that. But I don't see this as a time whenever you're looking at building a new structure. But I did look at development options. And what I took you to mean by that is that what options are there available currently within our system? There really is no existing county space currently available. That's a really great news story. That's well publicized. We've done a really good job of talking about that in the paper, that we went through and looked at every square foot. Well, when I say we, I mean Chris and I. He's nodding his head because this was not a cursory review. We exhaustively went through every square foot that the county owns to make sure that we're maximizing its efficiency, because we don't want to spend one tax dollar incorrectly. We did it at the perfect time. We hit the peak of the market, but we have had a dramatic reduction in our space needs, and we are right-sized right now. Massive reduction in cost for taxpayers as a result, and massive savings for them as well. But there is not an inch of space currently available in the county for this that would work or that would be okay. So that using existing county space is not an option. I think I also looked at county land options. Chris and I were talking about this a lot in the last week. We're in the process of trying to buy a piece of property for an ambulance station. But other than that, there are no county-owned lands. We sold Strathmere lands, quite rightly, to help develop in that area. We've sold the Middlesex County building. So we are not sitting on a land bank to build a purpose-owned facility that's just sitting out there. And speaking of a purpose-built facility, I think that's really what you're looking at. I can't imagine, you know, I saw the pictures from the Lambton facility that are out there. That is a retrofitted building. Frankly, it wouldn't get past our AODA compliance in terms of the way the shelving looks or in terms of the way the ramp is. I think you're looking at a purpose-built facility here, especially since we don't have any other facility space available for this. Especially considering that for the tourism benefits described, you want to be in proximity to hotels and restaurants. You want to be in the county, obviously. You don't want to be in a local municipal in the city if you're going to try and get tourism benefits. It has to be a central location. It has to be accessible. It would have to be environmentally controlled if you're going to keep paper records. And the Southwest Middlesex resolution referred to artifact preservation. That would be an interesting challenge as well, because then the footprint becomes even larger, and you're looking at turning it into a museum as well. So you're looking, by their own description, you're looking at a very large footprint if you're going to try to store original municipal documents and all municipal records, and you're looking at a purpose-built facility. So we can pursue some of those options if that's what council wants to do, but I think it's pretty clear that what the options are. In terms of my recommendation, it's the same one I had in previous years. There's a long list of things that you could fund that are legislatively required or investment in these services first. I have a slide that shows that, but there's a lot of things that happen in other communities that we're not doing, that are on this list. Everything from credits for childcare, all the way through to funding hospitals, to other things that are on this list. It's a massive list of investments you could make. And I would focus on those. That was my suggestion last time, and that's what council decided to do. In the event that you want to advance the idea of an archive, I would pursue the development of an intermunicipal service agreement for the preservation of those local historical digitized records between willing municipalities. Alternatively, you may want to focus on modernization funding for a digital archive. And I think it's important to have a conversation about discussion of local historical records and municipal records. They're not the same. And if, the warden and I were talking about a bit this morning, I said, if you really want to get down to where you're doing something, focus on those local historical records, because I just can't see that those municipal records are a priority based upon the fact that we have all those programs in place. I would also focus on digital preservation as opposed to paper preservation of all files. I can't imagine having a situation where we're asking people to come in and look at paper documents versus a digitized one. But that is quite an expensive option. What's being asked for is probably the most expensive of all the options. I think that's it, Madam Warden. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that presentation, Bill. And I will open it up for discussion. Councillor DeVete.
Thank you, Warden, for that. And thank you to Bill for that report. I think a historical review and a look at the context is likely a good place to start a conversation as any. And I know most of us were not around the horseshoe, as you pointed out, the last time there was an archives discussion in 2011. So, and just to be, I just thought I should be clear too, I didn't expect a full report with respect to any potential undertaking of creating county councils would be presented today, but I appreciate all the different concepts that you've touched on. And for the benefit of residents, I did want to also reassure them that our county strategic plan references the fact that county council has a focus on progressive and modern ideas and attitudes, and also has a mind to the important history of this county. And so I'm trying to take it sort of an overall inclusive look at this. I think before any real concrete work is undertaken, there are a lot of questions that come to mind immediately, and I think Bill's done a good job of raising them, and we've heard what his thoughts are on some of them. I'm not clear on how archives work in other counties and jurisdictions. Are they repositories for municipal documents only, or historical documents only, or a combination of both? What works, why or why not? I would think that things are changing rather quickly in the archival world with technology and things like that too. I don't know what the impacts of those changes are, what the cost differentials are and why. There's also the issue sort of the environmental and political and social contexts out there, and what people want to do with their time and how they spend money and where they want to live. There's all kinds of stuff out there. I think once we have more information, though, we can actually maybe spend some time in thinking creatively and considering what kinds of strategies we might take in getting answers from considering some of the points that Bill's raised and discussing any possibilities and collaborations. Maybe the partnership isn't with the county. Maybe the partnership, as Bill suggests, is with the municipalities that don't have an archive or do have an archive or have a museum with archival stuff in it. I don't know what this all looks like. I'm not prepared to stand in front of residents though and say I'm not prepared to do any work on it. So the preliminary work might be say research and understanding some of the basic pieces, and then when we understand the what's and the ifs and whens and whys and some of the costs and so on, we could have a conversation about what is or isn't, or where we want to go, or why, or over what time frame, and what does it look like. So that's basically where I wanted to get to. I did understand that there was some thought of putting this on the budget conversation, just in a conversation earlier today. Yeah, I mean, my thought is this should be referred back to staff in terms of finding out some of the sort of basic pieces so that we can actually understand what questions we are trying to answer. To your point, Bill, you say, you know, I don't know, do you want to look at this or this or this? And I don't know either. I'm just saying we need to do the work and we need to have the conversations and have answers for residents when they ask questions about these things. An informed decision for me is fundamental to getting from A to Z. So I just think developing a logical process to undertake something like this is required, and we need to give it very serious thought. So, well, I think that just sort of sets it all out there. I'm not sure that I'm prepared to say no when I don't know exactly what I'm saying no to, or saying yes, and when I don't know what I'm saying yes to either. So I'll stop with that then and let other councillors weigh in as well. So thank you for that, Warden.
Okay, thank you, Councillor DeVete. I know that Bill was having some technical issues moving through his PowerPoint, and in reviewing the PowerPoint with him earlier, I know that there was a recommendation slide, not a recommendation slide, but an option slide about the possibility of referring it back to budget discussion. So I think that that's why it was missed in the technical issues he was having maneuvering through it.
Yeah, sorry.
And I think yep.
And sorry, and my version wasn't the same as the version that was on the screen. So
yep.
Yeah, okay, apologize for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I know that Bill did some editing and updating between the publication of the agenda and then presentation today. So and I saw Bill shaking his head to that referring it back to budget committee was an option on his option slide. Okay, I know I saw a lot of hands go up at one point, so I will look to see Councillor Vanderheyden.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Thank you for the presentation, Bill. And I was around when we had the original conversation, just to let you know. And I know I voted against putting an archive together for various reasons that I think some of them still hold true. Right now, where I'm sitting is digitalization. I mean, seriously, that's where the future is. That's what we're all doing in our municipalities with all of our fun. One of those spaces that Bill's talking about is the basement of the town hall here. That entire room was full of documents pre-COVID. It is now an office. It is like totally empty of files. And we're talking, there were rows and rows and rows of files. They were all digitalized and moved forward. We can access them anytime we need. And that is where I believe we need to go. I am absolutely not in favor of putting a brand new building in place with a staff, because I think that is just not good use of taxpayer money. I really don't. I think we have all these lineups for things that we have to do. And I'm just not in favor of that. There has to be another way. And if we have another way, would that be with the different municipalities? If a municipality is interested in housing the community pieces, that's one thing. We have our own museum here and we house a lot of that. But you know, municipalities will house municipalities' documents. I'm like with Bill, I'm not going to house my documents in Strathroy Caradoc somewhere else. I mean, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. So I guess what I'm then saying is, so what else can we do? Is there another way? They don't all need to be in the same spot. What else can we do to achieve the goal of preserving some of these documents without, you know, spending millions of dollars?
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Vanderheyden. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, and through your worship, I definitely agree with Councillor DeVete as well as Councillor Vanderheyden. I think that building a new building is not an efficient or appropriate way of spending dollars here, but I think there is a way to look outside of the box and see how we can tackle this issue, and not just when it comes to municipal records. I know Bill had put a lot of emphasis on that, but I think this is a lot bigger discussion than just municipal records. And I look at what we're doing with our county libraries and how we're turning our libraries into community hubs. Here in Dorchester, we have a whole history room dedicated to that. And I'm just wondering, you know, is the libraries a way to go out of the box and look at how we can use it as not only to feature our history, but also as an education piece in our municipalities. And that goes to Councillor Van Hayden's point. You know, Strathroy Library can feature Strathroy's history and things like that. And so I'm just wondering, you know, if we look outside of the box, are there avenues that we already provide services that we can just amplify the services that we're already taking? And so I'm not sure just referring this to the budget committee is necessarily the best avenue to go down, because we don't even know what exactly we're looking to budget. You know, whether we're budgeting a brand new building or whether we're budgeting something additional in the library or a completely different avenue. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, as Councillor David said, for us to have more conversations and see how exactly we envision this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Elliott. Any other comments from Council? Councillor Mayhew.
Thank you, Madam Warden, very much. I think there's more consensus around the table than we think. And Bill, I disagree. I agree with practically everything you've said in your presentation. From the very start of this conversation on historical archives, it was my opinion that this was an unrealistic ask. That being said, the principle of the request was legitimate in the sense that preserving documentation and history of the archives of what went on before us is not only valuable, but you could almost say it's a moral responsibility in some way to preserve what has been before us. When I asked for options in my motion, I was hoping that consideration of a vision with, of course, a much less financial burden could be brought forth. New considerations are very often begin by an assessment of where we are and what we have and an evaluation of their importance. Where and what do these historical societies have that hold the responsibility of inventorying documents and other tangible histories? And what can we as a county government do to assist them on a local level? And I think that has been mentioned, the local aspect of it. All of us have been privileged to have been the recipient of efficiency monies from higher levels of government. My question, could the county fund some of these improvements to the efficiencies of document preservation to these societies on a local level? Digital technology has changed record keeping forever, and I embrace it wholeheartedly. Our municipality is leaders in that field. But I remind you that most of us around this horseshoe, including staff, have pictures and notes on our smartphones of moments in our life that are memorable and special to us, yet we'll never develop them into photographs. On a lighter note, Council, when we find ourselves in the company of Mr. Kerwin at Strathmere Lodge, there will not be an album beside our bedside table with our cell phone photos in it. Bill made many good points in his report. And Bill, I apologize for it being deja vu to you, but I, like Ina, were not privy to these former discussions. The volunteer community is shrinking. They are tired. They work without any remuneration. What can we do as one of the governing bodies to help preserve the history they hold? Can we consider a responsible amount of funds annually to these societies, or something that we can do to assist them in preserving the history? It's close to Southwest Middlesex, because we hold in Southwest Middlesex, we have a stellar building, historical society, and we house all of the records of Middlesex County land transfer titles. We resurrected them from the University of Western Ontario at some point after they ended up there. In the last 30 days, I accessed information back to 1857 on a commercial property, and we wanted to know the proprietorships and the type of businesses that would mitigate cost savings. It would help with cost savings on knowing the nature of the former uses of the building in terms of environmental assessment. My CAO has recently requested information on a discussion she is having with CNR. And again, those documents were found in our archives that go back to the mid 1800s and deals that were cut with CNR between property owners and the Canadian National Railway. So there is a body. Rather than say it is a nice to do project, I would like to call it a document management and the preservation of our past history. Not all documents have historical value. There's no question about that. The vast majority don't. But there are some that when you hold them in your hand, you are holding history. And I'm wondering if we could be creative and visionary enough to look at the local municipalities within Middlesex County, identify the locations, the quality of the locations, some may be better than others, and somehow try to facilitate this volunteer community that has been doing this for a century and more. So thank you, Madam Warden. I hope to see further discussion in this in the meetings ahead. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick. You're not coming through, Allison. I think you have to press that button. No?
Am I on now?
Now you are.
Do you know,
there you are.
My body finds strange ways of turning this button off when I'm not looking. It must be a certain thing I do.
I don't want to know where it is, okay?
I won't tell you. I just want to say, first of all, I'm very jealous of Joanne's basement if she's got it cleared in an office in there, because I can relate to our basement down here where we're sitting right now, and it's full of files. And I would be very loath to go through and say, this is a relevant file, this is not a relevant file. That's something that's way beyond my capacity. I just feel like this conversation has gone from 0 to 60 really fast. Like I understand that we've been approached in the past, and I too was not at the table when that was approached. So it's a new conversation for me. And I hear things like nice to do and versus the obligation to do. But one thing I need to hear is it feasible? And how do we know if it's feasible or not? And I think when we start talking about budget, that's something that we should be putting into the budget is how do we look at a feasibility study to see how this could be done, or how this can be borne maybe equally throughout the county. I'm not sure. And that's why there's too many questions here to be able to just say today, this is the end of the discussion. I don't know how we define what's relevant and what's not relevant. And I think that's the hard thing. We sat down together as a council and we invested time in our vision about moving Middlesex forward, but we just can't dispose of the past, be it municipal records or be it historical documents. And I think that's something that we still have to determine. And that would be my recommendation, is to just put money aside in budget to look at a feasibility study to see how other counties are handling this, because it is simple now to digitalize, but not everything needs to be digitalized. We need someone to be able to sort through that and say this is historical, this has relevance, and I think that's how we could do that. So that's my idea there.
Any other comments from councillors at this time? Councillor Ropp.
Thank you, Warden. I've been listening to all the conversations, and I agree that this isn't something, it isn't about throwing a whole lot of money at it and to have a separate facility. I wouldn't be in favor of that at all. One comment I'd like to make is that we're already at a local level, and I thought most of us at local levels are working with our local historical societies or museums and that type of thing. in North Middlesex, we have someone who goes around and does talks to different groups about the history of North Middlesex. Maybe we're fortunate that way, I don't know, compared to some of the others, but I'm not against having some kind of a feasibility on some other options. I would like to see that at least, not talking about an option of spending a lot of money or throwing those things out, but to have a conversation about what some options could be, I would be in favor of that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Robb. Any other comments from around the horseshoe? Bill, did you want to add anything? There's been a lot of comments that have been shared. I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add at this point.
No, I think I'll just take the opportunity to think about some of the things I've heard and maybe clarify a few things, and we'll go back at it.
Okay. I think, oh, Councillor DeVete, did you want to?
Sorry, I should just clarify that when I mentioned the budget, I thought of that as perhaps the first step to provide some funding if we wanted to do something like Councillor Warwick noted, like a feasibility piece or some research cost or photocopying, whatever, but that might be something that we want to earmark just so we know that if we have to do X, that we can afford this much. So just to be clear, thank you.
All right, thank you for that clarification, Ina. Certainly, I think that there's been a lot of discussion, and what I've gathered from the notes that I've taken is that more information is required. Perhaps we have more questions than we have answers to. As Bill just said, you know, for staff to try to take it all in, I imagine we'll go back and watch this portion of the meeting to digest it all, and then come back with maybe an option for moving forward to that feasibility study and how that's handled, whether it's a presentation at budget time or whatever. But I certainly think that the questions that have been raised are good ones. It's important to have that historical perspective to know, you know, where the discussions have gone in the past, to know why it is that we are here today with that. And I trust that our staff will go back and review and then come back with a plan as to how we move the conversation forward to try to get some of those answers that perhaps are beyond our walls at this point. Okay, Councillor DeVete.
This is a procedural question. Then do we need to make a formal motion to refer back to staff?
Well, as luck would have it, our clerk, Marcy, and I were talking about that procedurally in planning for that. And no, we do not need a motion at this time for that. And I don't know whether, Marcy, you want to clarify anything on that, but we do not need a motion to circle back.
Yeah, no, a motion can be made for staff to report back on that without, sorry, we don't need a motion for that.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so if there's no other comments or questions to be made, then we will move on to our action items. And the first one up is a report from Dirk, and that is the Middlesex Centre Official Plan Amendment number 55 for Everly Homes, and it's file number 39-MC-OPA55. Dirk?
Thank you, Madam Warden. You've seen, I won't go through a lot of detail on this. You've seen applications like this before. Basically, the applicants are looking to construct a single detached dwelling on the farm property and also an accessory building where they'd have a second dwelling unit within it. This does require an amendment to the Middlesex Centre official plan, as they're not allowed sort of across the landscape. The amendment was adopted by the municipality and submitted to the county, and we did not undertake a circulation given the minor nature of it. So certainly the Planning Act and the PPS do provide for dwelling units within access or ancillary structures where appropriate, and the Planning Act directs municipalities to determine where those units should be placed. In this case, Middlesex Centre do support the official plan amendment, and I've reviewed it against the PPS and the county's official plan, and I also recommend approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Dirk. Any questions or comments on what's in front of you? As Dirk said, it is fairly straightforward. We've seen these applications before. So seeing no raised hands, there is a motion in front of you, and I would ask for a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Warwick and Councillor DeVete. All opposed? From Strathmere, and it's a resident room window curtain in project, and looks like an upgrade. So this is a capital project request. So Brent, there you are. Now I can find you. There.
Thank you, Warden. Through you to council. Window curtain replacement at the lodge is a council approved capital budget project. Request for tenders was posted for the project on the bids and tenders website. And in response to that, the lodge received five responses to that tender. The lowest bidder quoted a price that did not include the cost of replacement and disposal of the existing curtains, despite the fact that the mandatory requirements section of the tender specifically identified the need to do that. As such, I'm recommending to council that the lodge be approved to enter into an agreement with the second lowest bidder, that being Empire Window Covering Limited, in order to replace the window curtains at a cost of $57,500 before taxes. Happy to take council questions in support of that recommendation.
Great. Thank you for that, Brent. Questions or comments on this? Councillor Vanderheyden.
I will make the motion to accept that report.
Okay.
And, you know, it seems like it's been about 20 years since we built that building, and that's a lot of windows that need covering. So that's why there's that large price tag. But we need to keep our buildings up to date, and this is people's homes. So I totally will move that recommendation.
That's great, Joanne. And you don't have to sew them. Councillor Mayhew. Are you just seconding that?
I'll second that, Madam Warden. And one question to Brent,
sure,
if you may allow it. Brent,
yep.
Is flammability part of the study on that? Like are they have to have some flame retardancy or anything like that? Is that part of the criteria? Thank you.
Yes,
Madam
through the warden to Councillor Mayhew. Yes, absolutely. Fire retardancy is a significant part of our legislation and goes into the thought process for these products.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We do have a mover and a seconder, but I would entertain more questions or comments if they're out there. So seeing none, the motion in front of you has been moved by Councillor Vanderheyden and seconded by Councillor Mayhew. All opposed? And that's carried. On to correspondence and information items. AMO policy update for October 7th, 2021. AMO policy update for October 12th, 2021. Letter from the Solicitor General of Ontario, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plans. Cindy, do you have an update on where we are with ours and implementation on that?
Sure, thanks. And through the warden, I can provide a quick update today. The first Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan was completed in partnership with the local municipalities. It is a 5-year plan. We took both an overall Middlesex approach, but also a local municipal approach. We also worked with a number of community partners. The four priority areas for the plan were health, housing and homelessness, quality of life, and public safety. The plan has been submitted, which includes goals and objectives. And the next steps is to discuss an implementation plan with the local CAOs. The implementation will include outcomes and performance measures. I will come back to County Council with a formal implementation plan that will include working with local municipal committees and leveraging existing communities. I also want to point out we can't do this alone, so we really have to work together. So that's kind of my next step, is really to talk to our local CAOs and come back.
Okay.
Thanks, and happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thanks for that update, Cindy. Any questions on that? Okay. A letter from MECP regarding changes to the current land use compatibility guidelines. Letter from MECP regarding new regulations under the Conservation Authorities Act. Letter from MECP regarding proposed amendment to the Environmental Assessment Act. Letter from Ministry of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry regarding legislative amendments. Letter from MMAH regarding enhanced COVID-19 vaccine certificates with QR code. News article from CBC, Rural Canada's Visible Homelessness Problem. Councillor Vanderheyden.
Thank you. Through the warden, I found that a very interesting article, especially since it's a community we all know really, really well. And we're all facing this sort of thing now because of COVID, because of the housing market, because of mental health issues where people are not being able to find help for that. There's so many reasons. It's a mountain of reasons. And I find that this is something that we need to continue to have conversations about. And I know that a number of communities, including ours, have put an application into the Rapid Housing Initiative to try to find different ways of producing homes or apartments or things where it's more affordable for people to stay. And this is not a big city issue anymore. This is rural Ontario. This is small urban and rural issue. And we need to really start focusing on how we collectively can help support people that are going to be out on the street. I mean, we just talked about records management, which I love history and I'm very passionate about. But these are people that are sleeping on the street. You know, when we talk about where we're going to use our tax dollars and our conversation, I'm not trying to mitigate one and make it less than the other, but you know, these are human lives that we're facing here. And I when I read that, I thought, you know, these are people that through no fault of their own have been, you know, what do they call it, pandemic out of their home. They've been renovated out of their homes, etc. And it's just wrong. Thanks, Kathy. So I just wanted to say that because I really think this is an important issue for us to keep an eye on.
Yep, thanks for that, Councillor Vanderheyden. I think that there's a lot of nodding heads of as you were speaking. You know, it's something that we can't lose sight of. You know, the question is, what do we do? How do we do it? That's a big questions, but we can't stop that conversation. So I know that Cindy and the work that she's doing in her department, in our own communities, and then actually in the work that the Women's Caucus is doing with our advocacy work. All these are important discussions, and the work that Adrian's doing with the city. Hopefully one day we can actually see some positive steps that have been taken. Any other comments on that before I move on? Okay, calls for nominations to the 2022 to 2023 Good Roads Board of Directors. Councillor Vanderheyden.
No surprise, I have a question. This is a board that Chris and Kelly and I know is a really important board that does a lot of work for lobby education, advocacy for infrastructure and roads. And so I encourage people to put their name forward for this, but I just wanted to know, and I don't want to put Kelly on the spot, but if you're going to ask for a nomination, you know, I'd be willing to support that.
Thank you, Joanne. I still have one more year on my term, so I'm still good.
Okay. Budget variance report for September 2021 from Cindy. Minutes of the September 28th, 2021.
Madam Morgan, sorry, I had a question on that.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's all right. And the budget variance piece that I wanted to speak to was the Strathmere, the Strathmere Lodge piece where we're out of sync with our budget for that. I'm trying to find it, which page it's on. Of course, it's not coming up on my screen. It has to do with the budget difference in what we put forward for, I think it's to pay the loan. Is that the piece?
Budget variance, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find that.
It is on the.
It's on
page
page 5
yes,
of 5 of 28.
It is the debenture. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I don't know, Cindy.
Hi, can I come back to you on that? Sorry, through the warden. I can't open the document at this point in time. It's probably just a timing issue, just in when we paid something. So maybe additional payment you'll see there, but before the end of the meeting, I can come back. I just have to open the document. Sorry about that.
No. I was having trouble opening it too, so we're good.
Okay, I'll come back to you before the end of the meeting then, Cindy. Okay, minutes from the September 28th, 2021 meeting of the library board. Joanne?
Sorry, I got all these questions written down. I don't know, what can I say? To the library reopenings, and I know that people have been very excited to get back into our libraries, and I think that's something to highlight, because our staff have been working really hard, doing everything they can to make sure that the experience for everybody moving into these buildings is a good one and that everyone's safe. So maybe if Lindsay, if you could just update us a little bit on how the reopenings went. This seemed like an opportunity to brag about our awesome libraries.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderheyden, and through warden to council. Our reopening is, it's going very well. You captured it exactly, Councillor Vanderheyden. Very positive experiences. So we have 10 branches open right now and working on the next phase that would bring our set a timeline for bringing our smallest branches, the 5 remaining branches, back online. And so now we're just working towards that timeline for a return to full hours, which, with restrictions lifting, it's going to be easier and easier, but it's been very positive so far. Very few challenges, just a few hiccups along the way, but really positive response. Fantastic response in Strathroy to seeing the new facility. And it's been great to meet new faces, a lot of new people to communities that were never in any of our libraries. So that's been it's also been really positive for staff to get those, rebuild those connections. So going very well.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Councillor Vanderheyden. Chamber of Commerce Business Awards. Shogun Mataki and Algonquin Bridge expansion. Appreciation letter from Victim Services, Middlesex, London. Economic Development Fall 2021 newsletter. Councillor Vanderheyden.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I found this an exciting report, actually, because, we're starting to move forward again. We seem to have been, stuck in a time zone for about 2 years. And I really appreciated, the updated website. I went to it. It's clean. It looks really, really good. And I would encourage people to go to the website, visit middlesex.ca, and also the culinary guide. These are things that we worked really hard on. And I saw Kara there you are, Kara. The staff and the team have worked really hard to put these together. And they are, outstanding. And that's obvious when you get recommended for awards. So I'll just leave it there and you can take over from there if you want, Kara. But I just think we have to sometimes say kudos for the good work we're doing. And it doesn't always go recognized. So thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. And I think the award announcement is tomorrow, isn't it, Kara, from the TIO conference?
Through you, Warden, and thank you, Councillor Vanderheyden. I am in Ottawa right now at the TIO conference, and the award ceremony is taking place tomorrow evening. So I'll keep everyone posted, but thank you so much to everyone for getting engaged in the finalist celebration. Just to be nominated in this category with so many phenomenal projects happening during and post-pandemic is pretty wonderful. So we're really, really pleased. So thank you very much for those words.
Okay, thanks. Yes, congratulations. Okay, a mover and seconder to accept those items for information. Councillor Elliott and Councillor Mayhew. All opposed? And that's carried. And I guess before we move on, Cindy, did you grab that information?
Yes, through the warden, if I can just clarify the question. So I believe you were asking on the debentures, and it was the interest and the principal payments. Okay. So I can confirm that, yes, we've already paid. We actually pay in January and July of each year. That's why you see the full payment there.
Okay, because it says we're at 120% of the payment, where it says under the expenditures, it's 100%, which makes sense. So that's why I thought there might have been an extra payment, maybe the timeline or something, but.
No, sorry, through the warden to the counselor, I just verified with my manager of finance that we have made the payments. So I can go back and look at the revenues. That's just the difference between the county of Middlesex and the province. But I can tell you that we have made the payments.
Are you comfortable with that, Councillor Vanderheyden?
We'll take a look at it and send you an email.
Yeah, because it just seems like, I know we're making our payments. That's not the issue. It's the 100% versus the 120%.
Yeah, you're more worried about an overpayment instead of an underpayment. And we'll get back to you on that. We'll send you an email probably this afternoon.
I do, if I can go through the warden, I just want to point out there isn't an overpayment. So I can tell you that 100% confidence that isn't the case. It's just the accrual going from one account to the other, but I will confirm in detail exactly.
Okay, all right, thanks, Cindy. Okay, inquiries. And new business, Councillor Warwick.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I know that we have been discussing this back and forth, and I just wanted to let the rest of council know that I did ask the warden to send a letter regarding the Canada-wide system of early learning and childcare and Indigenous early learning and childcare. That sounds a bit repetitive, but yeah, I think you all understand what I'm saying there. We know then that the last federal election, that was something that's been discussed Canada-wide, and we'd be looking forward to something happening in Ontario with this. And I think it's important after the dust is settled to keep this topic in the forefront. And that is why I asked the warden to send a letter to not only Justin Trudeau, but also Doug Ford, to let him know that at the bottom here, we're looking for that type of support. It's nice to hear the people at the top talk about it, but I think it's important for us to keep working away here and making sure that everybody keeps it on its radar. Those that have been on the Women's Caucus over the last year knows how long this conversation has been. That was something that was on the National Status of Women's Report 50 years ago. And it's our duty to keep this in the forefront. So there is a copy of the letter that's available if anybody wants to see it. I do see that it is addressed to Justin Trudeau and to Doug Ford, but I also think we should be sending copies to our local MPs and MPPs as courtesy as well. So that's basically all I've got to say, and a copy of the letter could be available to anybody who wants to see it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Warwick. And we will forward it to everybody after council. And that is a good point, to keep our local MPs and MPPs copied on it as well. So we will make that adjustment, and it'll be sent out later this afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay. Also in new business, you've got the list of meetings ahead of us for the rest of the year. And announcements. The Warden's Banquet is November 27th. I believe invitations have gone out, and please RSVP accordingly back to Marcy. With that, I'm going to look to see if I missed any hands with all these screens. I don't think I have, so I would ask for a mover and a seconder to adjourn today's meeting at 8 minutes after 3. Councillor Warwick and Councillor Vanderheyden. All opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Have a good cup